Now that I've covered each of the teams in the NFC North, I set about giving you my official 2015 NFC North predictions. And I'm going to do this for each of the 8 divisions. Once I cover the teams in those divisions, kind of give you an idea of my outlook for them heading into the 2015 NFL season, then I'll piece it all together in a video where I give you my predictions for the divisional race. And then after I get through all 8 divisions, I will give you my playoff predictions and my Super Bowl 50 predictions. Who's going to make it there, who's going to win, and why. So anyways, NFC North predictions. This is a division that has been dominated by the Green Bay Packers in recent years. They've won the division 4 straight times. You look at it, you have those teams that will every once in a while get a little blip in the radar, like last year the Detroit Lions, similar to 2011. They put together a good season and they made it to the playoffs. But by and large, this has been the Green Bay Packers show for the past few years. And is that going to continue? Well, let's find out. In terms of who I think is going to bring up the rear in the division, I think it ultimately is going to be the Chicago Bears. This is a team that even with their 5-11 finish last year, frankly, wasn't even that good of a team. They fell apart. They were old on both sides of the ball in many bad areas. Combine that with maddeningly frustrating yet expected inconsistent quarterback play from Jay Cutler, poor discipline, poor leadership, poor coaching. I mean, just a combination of things. And even when you look at it, when they finished 5-11, they should have lost to San Francisco, could have lost to the Jets. I mean, this could have been a team that only won 2 or 3 football games. With new general manager Ryan Pace in the fold, it's going to take some time. This Bears team needs a full and total complete rebuild. And until they move on finally once and for all from the Jay Cutler experience, that's just not going to happen. Ultimately, all the Bears are doing is just kind of biding time and in some ways wasting some time. Now, with the hire of John Fox, is he the guy that necessarily gets you to a Super Bowl and wins it? No. But is he the guy that you can bring in and turn around your situation and change the culture of your football team? Absolutely. And I expect the Bears to be a better football team in 2015, even though I don't necessarily think that will result in much of a difference in the win-loss record. I think this team will be more disciplined on both sides of the ball. They will have more consistent leadership and a better direction. I think they will be, in particular, be better coached on the defensive side of the ball. So I would expect the defense to play quite a bit better than it has the past 2 years. They will actually have some type of identity with their new 3-4 defense under head coach John Fox and defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. In terms of the offensive side of the ball, this is a Bears team that still has some weapons in the passing game, and they have one of the best all-around running backs still in the league, and Matt Forte. You know, of course, they have Cutler, so that hurts them, but that's not the only issue. I do expect the Bears to take the ball out of Cutler's hands more. For whatever reason, over the past 2 years, they wanted to put the ball in Cutler's hands more. For whatever reason, that's still unbeknownst to me. So I would expect this team to try and establish a run-first mentality, a run-first identity, which could help the offense and ultimately help the defense. The simple fact of the matter is, though, is while the X's and O's and the leadership is going to be better, the Jimmies and Joes really aren't. The Bears, to me, are a 4-win, maybe 5-win team. I'll be optimistic, and I'll go ahead and say 5-11 in 2015. Now, they could end up a little bit better, but even in that case, as I referenced in the Bears preview video, I think their ceiling is really 7-9. So either way, not a good football team. And it would be just like the Bears, to win just enough games to not be god-awful horrible, but win too many games to get themselves out of a top 5 draft position and potentially in a position where they could draft a franchise-changing quarterback. So I think the Bears ultimately are a safe pick at this point to bring up the rear. I do differ from some people because I've seen a lot of people that put the Detroit Lions in second, maybe just ahead of the Minnesota Vikings. I've got the Detroit Lions third. I just don't like the vibe I have about this team heading into this season. I mean, I can quantify it some, but sometimes you just have that feeling. You kind of have to go with that feeling. Matthew Stafford is what Matthew Stafford is. He could be more than what he is, but he ultimately never is. This is a team that I still have concerns about their ability to protect Matthew Stafford in the passing game with their offensive line. This is also a team that I question their ability to run the ball, even with them spending a second-round pick on Amir Abdullah. Those are 2 major issues for that Detroit Lions offense in 2014, their inability to consistently protect Matthew Stafford, especially on the right side of the offensive line, and then their inability to consistently run the ball between the tackles. I'm not sure they've gotten a whole lot better in either one of those 2 areas. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, you lose a Ndamukong Suh, that's going to hurt. Yes, he's one man, he's one player, but he was so important to so many things that they did, and he opened up things for so many other guys on the defensive side of the ball, whether that was DeAndre Levy or Stephen Tulloch or Ezekiel Ansah. Now you don't have that focal point. Now you don't have that centerpiece of the defense there, and he happens to be in the middle of that defense, and that could potentially be a crushing blow. Now, sometimes long-term teams are better off for losing that star player because it puts more responsibility on other guys. You're not so dependent on what that one guy does, and it allows you to reinvest your resources in other areas of the organization. But you'd have to expect for a Detroit Lions defense that was so good and elite in 2014 that losing Ndamukong Suh, they're going to take a step back in 2015, and I would expect them to do so. Yes, they've got Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate in the passing game, but again, this will be a Detroit Lions team at times that will play like they can beat anybody, but often also at times will sit there and find ways to beat themselves, and I expect them to do that. I think the Lions may win 8 games, but I'll go with 7 and 9. I got the Minnesota Vikings finishing second. I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough with a 9 and 7 record to make the playoffs or not in a deep and talented, loaded NFC, but they'll be in the mix. I really like what the Minnesota Vikings have going on. They don't have an elite defense yet, but they're building up their defense, and it's getting better. And they have, in particular, some nice young talent on that side of the ball. Xavier Rhodes, Harrison Smith. You look at Sharif Floyd, this year's second-round pick, and Eric Kendricks. They have some pieces in place. Give it time, and Mike Zimmer could have that Vikings unit as a top 5 defense, top 7 defense in the league some point in time by 2016, 2017. You look on the offensive side of the ball. What in part is impressive about the Minnesota Vikings finishing 7 and 9 in 2014 is the fact that you started a rookie quarterback for a majority, but not all of the season. But all the while, your franchise player, one of the best players in the history of the franchise, the premier running back in the league, Adrian Peterson, was gone after week 1. So you had 15 games of the season where you didn't have your best player in the focal point of your offense. Well, now you've got Adrian Peterson back in the fold, along with Jerick McKinnon, Matt Asiata. You've got some nice pieces in the running game. This is a team that will be able to run the ball, along with some of the guys they have on the outside, like Mike Wallace and Charles Johnson, potentially a Cordero Patterson, Kyle Rudolph at the tight end position. There are some weapons to work with, some weapons that will help protect your young quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. And with the way that Bridgewater finished out the 2014 season, if he starts off on that trajectory and then progresses as the season goes along, this not only could be a 9 and 7 Minnesota Vikings team or maybe a 10 and 6 team that's sniffing the playoffs. This is a team that could be really setting themselves up to be the team in the NFC North that ends up challenging the creme de la creme, the cream of the North, and that is the Green Bay Packers. I don't really see at this point in time how anybody could make a really sound argument that anybody other than the Green Bay Packers are likely to win the NFC North. I think they're favorites. I think they're big-time favorites. I think they are a legit Super Bowl contender in 2015. It starts with Aaron Rodgers, but it's more than that. You look at the receivers. You've got Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson, the young Devontae Adams. Eddie Lacy provides some nice offensive balance on the ground. You look on the defensive side of the ball. You've still got Clay Matthews in the fold. Julius Peppers played well at times last year. They've added some young depth to their secondary. Now, that's a bit of a concern for me is their secondary with young guys like last year's first-round pick, Clinton Dix, and this year's first- and second-round picks in Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins. You're putting a lot of young secondary players in very important positions in important areas and important stretches of the game. And at times, young secondaries tend to get exposed and tend to get burned, especially against really good quarterbacks and really good offenses that have a lot of weapons. So that could be something that potentially holds the Packers back from making it to Super Bowl 50. But I don't think it's enough to hold them back in this division. I think they are clearly still the class of the NFC North, and I'd be surprised if they don't run away with this division early. I've got the Packers finishing 12-4. It could go 11-5, but 13-3 also wouldn't be that surprising. I think the Packers could very well be trying to position themselves for at least a first-round bye in the playoffs and potentially home field advantage throughout. So I think you'll only end up with one playoff team out of the NFC North, and I think that'll be the division champion Green Bay Packers, but that may be the team that ends up with the #1 overall seed in the NFC playoffs. The Bears are a work in progress, but I think they'll play better even if their record doesn't reflect it. I think the Lions will lose some of the games that they won last year that they lost the year before, and they'll come back a little bit more to reality of who they are. I think the Minnesota Vikings are the team to watch. They are the team on the upswing. if the Minnesota Vikings can split the season series with the Packers and beat them once, anything is possible, but I still think it's pretty safe to say that the Green Bay Packers will win the NFC North in 2015.